Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, everybody. This is episode 8 of Questions on My Mind. And today's episode is about bringing practicality to spirituality. And I've got the lovely Marina Oswald with me. I actually interviewed Marina quite a while ago now on confidence, and things have moved on quite a bit. And she's now trained in the Akashic Records, astrology, human design, all sorts of things. So is a very good person to talk on this topic. So we will get to your welcome, Marina.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
We will get to your bio at some point, probably more towards the end, but I always like to just dive straight into the juicy conversation.
Fantastic. Let's get started.
So to me, bringing practicality to spirituality is about embodying that spirituality, so that it's who we are and it's how we live, not something we just remember when we're on the yoga mat or we go into a meditation or something. So what does bringing practicality to spirituality mean to you?
Absolutely. And just to echo what you said, it is about, about being that person rather than sort of finding little bits here and there. It's in the mundane. So for me, it's very much about being intentional, with everything we do, whether it's sort of our morning routine or making ourselves a cup of coffee or, putting in a meeting with our boss. It's about the intention behind that, forward thinking, bringing sort of that intention with you and what you know about yourself at a soul level to the forefront. And then that just makes any action you may do or choose not to do so much more practical, intentional, because you're looking at it through the lens of spirituality, of your intention, of your energy, of your soul frequency. And it just adds that beautiful layer to everything you do.
Okay. However, we live in it's very easy to kind of descend into what I call unconsciousness, because we can be intentional about making the cup of coffee and putting the meeting in with our manager and that kind of thing. But it's very hard to maintain that, because you might, I don't know, get up a little bit late. So now you're rushing and you're less intentional about that coffee because you've got to get out the door. And I don't know, various things happen at work. And so that whole intentionality, mindfulness, everything kind of disappears because that awareness has gone. So how do you become, how does being intentional become a way of being?
Great question, because there are times where things will not go to plan. We will wake up late and this and that. But I very much feel that you can bring that intentionality, being practical with, the tools you're learning into that. So, waking up late, you look at your space and actually think, no, the most loving thing I can do for myself, for my soul, is actually, delay this meeting or ask this person to postpone. With anything we're doing in life, once we do it frequently enough, it becomes a habit, it becomes second nature. So then you almost don't need to think about it. It turns on from being a something on your to-do list to, oh, well, I take 5 minutes to meditate every morning because that's just part of my routine. It becomes a habit. And it's interesting because with a lot of my clients, it's those habits that they form towards the end of our work together. And you know, a year ago would have thought, oh, I could never do that, or I could never do this. And once they become a habit, they become much more comfortable. And then you start seeing those sort of practical benefits from what you're doing. So it's not so much always being, you know, tip top, I'm so spiritual, I'm this, I'm always sort of have time on my hands, it's this. It's trusting that you'll do the best you know how with the tools you have at the time. And sometimes those tools will be limited time. There's been an accident that's happened, this has been cancelled, that's not going well. But it's trusting that you'll do the best with what you have at the time.
Okay. So doing the best with what you have at the time could look like still being in a state of frustration, or that you're caught up in traffic or something like that, which doesn't feel very spiritual, because we tend to think that being spiritual means I'm always in this state of either bliss or love and lighting my way through everything. You know, and that those more sort of the anger or the frustration, even feeling a bit low, is not spiritual.
Mm-mm. It's, you know, you touch on such an important point, and I think this is something that that's a big challenge within the spiritual community. You know, so many people see spirituality as inaccessible because it's for that person who is, you know, wearing 100% cotton, running through the fields, all so calm, you know, drinking cacao every day, high
Yeah,
vibes only. Whereas that is absolute crap. You know,
yeah,
I very much believe as souls, we are here on earth to have a human experience. And having a human experience means grief, it means frustration, it means anger, it means having an argument with someone. You know, we have to allow ourselves to have these emotions. We have to create space for it because, you know, we all know that when we bottle things up, it's not going anywhere apart from staying within ourselves, and it will come out one way or another.
mm,
You know, it's not about denying ourselves this human experience, these human feelings, these things that feel uncomfortable, tricky, you know, those ugly emotions. It's about how we choose to honor them and then move through them. And it's I think, you know, I know you've had Natasha Harris on your podcast before. She very much says it's not about high vibes only, it's about expanded. We're expanding in all these different directions. Where we go up, we must go down as well. It's this duality, and we are able to hold both. We're allowed to be deeply frustrated by something while also being very excited about the opportunity, or really scared to take this step outside of our comfort zone while knowing and trusting that it will be something that's good for us. So it's not about thinking, oh, I feel angry or I feel jealous of that person, therefore I'm not a good spiritual person. It's choosing to notice that and choosing to give yourself the autonomy to make the decision. How do I want to move forward from this? How do I want to respond to this reaction that I've had? So it's in that space. And I'm sure we'll talk about this more. You know, it's creating that space for yourself to choose a better feeling thought or pattern, you know, make those changes.
okay. So when I'm bringing practicality to spirituality, how does my life look different, or does it even look different? It might be, how does it feel different? I don't know. How does it look and feel different?
So I think to best answer that question, I if it would be okay, I'd like to share what I would suggest in terms of bringing practicality to spirituality.
Yeah,
So first and foremost, one of the first things I talk to my clients about, teach them about, is about how we make decisions. Because that is one thing, without a doubt, we will be doing every single day of our lives is making decision, whether it's something small or big.
Yeah.
So using the tool, and I like to, there are various different spiritual modalities and tools you can use. For this one, I would use the human design and understanding what our inner authority is. So you give someone, or you get for yourself, the tool of understanding how we best make decisions. And you can do that. Anyone can do that. You know, you don't need to be a practitioner, an expert in it. You can look up your human design chart, understand what your inner authority is, which is your decision-making tool, and you can begin using it straight away. So when you think about, okay, understanding how to make decisions that are best for you, in that one moment, you are transforming the way you live your life. You know, when we make hundreds of decisions on a daily basis, you know, and I'm not saying that you go from not understanding it at all to making the space for every decision, but it's that practice, it's that habit. It's thinking, okay, how can I use my inner authority to make a decision about this, to make a decision about that? And the more you do it, the more it becomes second nature. It moves from having to be something that you're very conscious about to your subconscious. And so the more you make decisions that are in aligned with you and in aligned with your human design chart, with your energy, with how you want to live your life, there is no denying the results that will come up. You know, doors will start opening, opportunities will come up, things will feel like they are flowing rather than feeling stagnant. So a very, you know, basic example is I feel too many of us are very bad at saying no. You know, we say yes out of obligation, or we say yes because we feel we need to prove ourselves. Whereas actually, when we say yes to someone to do something that we don't want to do, we're saying no to ourselves. Or we're taking that opportunity for someone who would actually really like to do it. So if you can learn how to make a decision that suits you and say confidently no, knowing that you've used this spiritual tool, this your human design chart to make that decision, you're then creating space for yourself. You're saying no to the things you don't want to do, and you're saying yes to more time and energy for yourself. In the long run, the time, energy, you know, focus, money that will save you is undeniable.
Okay. People don't, well, I was going to say maybe in spiritual circles they do know about these various tools, but perhaps not in the way that you've just explained it, or they may still need a practitioner because it's like it's okay to read your, how can I put it? Astrology is more than just reading a write-up in the newspaper as to what's likely to be happening for Virgos this week. It's not really about that. It's not, from what I understand, it's similar to human design in terms of knowing who you are, what your life lessons are, what your life path is, like what you're here to bring to the world. It's not about what's going to happen next week, or is this going to work out, or that going to work out. And I think people are quite focused on the outcomes rather than the actually, who am I? What am I wanting to, what am I needing to learn? Who am I wanting to become? They don't focus on that. They just focus on, is this thing going to work out? Is what do I need to do to get that? Or which is a very different energy.
Mm.
So where was I going with that? I guess it's one thing knowing what your inner authority is, or knowing what your sun sign is, but how do you really, you can't really, I suppose, unless you've got lots of time to dedicate to learning it, truly understand what these things mean for you without the help of a practitioner.
That's definitely in some cases of, you know, depends what you're looking at and what you want to achieve. So if you look at a astrological natal chart as a beginner, so overwhelming. Similarly with your human design chart. And so this is why I like to pick out with new clients, new people who I perhaps don't have, we don't have that much time to work together, is the inner authority. Because, anyone watching this podcast will have access to the internet, right? Will have access to a screen. And from there is so much information one can find out. So it is about, if people want to change their lives, they have to put in the effort. You can't live the same way day in, day out and expect something big to change, or a Ferrari suddenly to be in your driveway, or sort of someone to give you the keys to a £1 billion house, £1 million house. It is putting in the commitment, it is putting in the time, but it's knowing that you are worthy of that time and commitment. So specifically your comment about your question about, do we need a practitioner? Do we need someone to hold a hand? Absolutely. It's so helpful to have that, but we do not need it. Similarly, a personal trainer is a nice thing to have, but we don't need a personal trainer in order to do exercise. And so to go back to the point of the decision-making tool, that understanding what your human design is, and then finding out specifically this one aspect of it, your inner authority, anyone can do. We can share this with the show notes if you like. There's a website called the Jovian Archive. Get your chart, you put in your details, you find out what your inner authority is. And so, for example, let's say your inner authority is sacral. Google sacral inner authority. The amount of articles that come up, the amount of resources is amazing. I know that the tech world can be baffling. There are pros and cons, but this is a major way where I think that we can really harness technology in order to find out how to do these things. There are amazing spiritual teachers, coaches, mentors who write up this information, who will be sharing these things. So spending 5-10 minutes looking this up, and then perhaps checking in once a week on a Sunday evening. Oh, how did I use my inner authority over this last week? How can I use it more? Can it be absolutely transformative in terms of sort of turning this sort of one specific spiritual tool into a habit.
Okay. And can that, going back to bringing practicality to spirituality, can one tool, because there's so many different tools, can you get there using one tool, but just being consistent with that tool?
I suppose it depends on what one person's intention is. So in terms of what we're talking about today, bringing practicality, spirituality, we're talking about what the spiritual world is, the modalities, the tool, the things like that, right? And when we think about being practical, it's being able to see a change, being able to practice something, being able to make use of something. So absolutely, in answer to your question, you can use one tool, one aspect of one modality and be practical and see the changes in that. I think that when people do start using this one tool and see changes, see the results, obviously it's you can't help but think, okay, what more is out there? It like opens the door to that. So that's why I'd always suggest, if you're slightly skeptical or slightly nervous, do start with one thing, start small and then build up, because it's the small steps that make, the small consistent steps that make those lasting results.
And I think the thing with spirituality as opposed to religion, because spirituality is in religion, but religion isn't necessarily in spirituality, if you get the sense that I'm trying to make. But with religion, it's very, what's the word? It's very certain. You have your book, you have your rules, it's just one tool, basically. Whereas spirituality, you can come up from so many different angles. And I was going to say so many different intentions, possibly. So for me, what it means is improving myself and bringing the best of me to the world. Living from, I think some of the tenets are similar to what you're seeking from religion in some respects as well, though, in that you want to attain a level of enlightenment, I'm going to use that term, where it's just taking it back to being an enlightened being an enlightened person, ascending to a higher level of consciousness, which makes the energy you bring to the world so much better. That's my take on spirituality. So what tends to happen, though, with the ego is that we get impatient about it. Like, well, why can't I, the minute something happens that brings out anger or frustration, then we judge ourselves for not having got to the level of being that enlightened person where we can just immediately become aware, okay, I'm in anger. Let's just take a step back. How do I change my perception of this situation so that I can change the energy? Is it really that person's fault? So having that inner dialogue around it to change your perception so that you understand it differently, and then you might be able to dissipate that energy. But what might happen is we get unconscious, we stay in the anger, we say something, do something which escalates the situation. And then when we calm down afterwards, we then judge ourselves saying, I should have done this differently. I should have been this enlightened person, but instead I descended into what I'm going to call the dense sort of 3D energy. But you can't get to that level of enlightenment that quickly. It's kind of baby steps. So when we talk about being practical with it, it's not something in my view, so you do correct me if I'm wrong, it's not something that's going to happen overnight. It's something just with any religious practice, with any spiritual practice, it's something that you're going to be continuously working towards for your whole life. You're never going to get to a point where I'm now an enlightened being and nothing phases me. I realize I'm angry. But if I look at the situation, we're never going to stay in that energy. So if we're bringing practicality to it, what do we say to ourselves when we've lost our way a bit and we have descended into anger and we have lost it with someone and the fog is now clearing and we've just realized we've created more chaos than we needed to have created, but it's done. So instead of going into judgment, or is it okay to go into judgment of ourselves?
Good question. So
I said a lot there. Sorry, guys. I just went sort of, my brain just goes round and round and meandering. So
I'll respond as best I can, and if there's anything I've missed or any further questions, we can go into that. I like to think of, instead of thinking about this sort of reaching a higher plane, it's more this expansion, right? The more we grow, the more things we will notice, the more triggers we will have, the more. So it's not about, oh, I've completed that trigger, it's not going to come up again. Oh, I've completed anger, I'm never going to show it again. It's about, we're constantly going to be coming up against these things. I very much believe, part of the purpose of everyone's life is growing and learning, right? And so we are going to constantly be coming up with these things. And a shift I have been embodying for the last few years, and there's it's very much a lot of work to do, but it is to notice anything that feels uncomfortable, whether that's anger, whether that's a trigger, whether that's a limiting belief, whether that's a frustration with someone else, each thing as an opportunity to be curious and to learn. Because when you start seeing each of your reactions as an opportunity to learn, you suddenly think, oh, that's an opportunity, that's an area that I can grow, So for example, let's say someone says something in a meeting and you're triggered right away, and you start judging that person in your head, you start sort of thinking about what you'd like to say, or then you start feeling guilty. Oh, I feel really guilty about this, and then it creates space. You then think, actually, that's really interesting. I wonder why I thought that, being curious about it, bringing it, and being kind to ourselves. That self-judgment, I think, can be really damaging. There are certainly times where we can say, oh, come on, Marina, that was a bit of an overreaction, or like, there's no point judging that person in that way. But actually thinking, okay, well, what's the basis behind this? What's the root there? What is it in them or what they said that triggered me? And then each time something comes up which feels uncomfortable, you think, okay, this is an opportunity. Similarly, I talk about this when when I share with people what their soul frequency is. Our soul frequency holds the information about our gifts, about what comes to us naturally, how to step into our power. Yet with all of these things, there is this shadow side, and instead of seeing it as sort of a chance to berate ourselves, oh, I stepped in the shadow side, I'm cross with myself, seeing it as a chance to step more into alignment. So to give a practical example of this, my soul frequency is that of the harmonizer. And the shadow side of that is chaos, creating mess. Now, instead of, if I look around at my desk and think there's a mess there, instead of berating myself, I think, okay, well, I've noticed that. So therefore, there's an opportunity here for me to step into alignment with who I am as the harmonizer. And slowly, the more we do this, the more we create space for self-compassion. It's okay. Instead of thinking, oh, I should have done that. How do I want to move forward? Giving ourselves the autonomy. And just to touch on what you mentioned at the beginning of your question about, with many religions, there is a book, there's a way of being. I think that there's something, you can be both religious and spiritual, but with this sort of, what we're talking about in spirituality is you are giving yourself the autonomy to make that decision, rather than thinking, oh, I need to check in, how to do this with someone else.
As I was saying before, we're quite impatient in terms of getting somewhere. And like I said, there's actually no where to get to. It's just a continuous, you're just on this continuum really of growth and expansion. And you were saying you get more triggers, or you might get, so people who are starting this journey might be thinking, I should be looking to get to a place where it's plain sailing. And the triggers come up, but I don't get triggered. Or I get triggered, but it's so momentary because I realize the trigger, it's come back again. Good, I know what I'm going to do this time. I'm not going to react to that this time. Because surely, if it sounds like you're going to be tested more, I don't know, the tests are going to become a little bit harder, then it might start to sound like, well, then what's the point? Because for some people, the whole point of me becoming spiritual is because I want to manifest this great life where I have the Ferrari and the house and the this and that. So for some people, it's about manifesting things. But if it means I'm just going to get triggered more, or I'm going to have more tests or more opportunities for growth, that doesn't feel like the life that I thought I was going to get by becoming spiritual. Does that make sense?
It does. And I think the nuance here is when you're tapping into who you are at soul level, you know, this higher self of you, the spirituality, the definition of triggers changes. Not in that it means something else, you know, in the dictionary, but the feeling that comes up is different. You know, we get an obstacle on our way, a limiting belief, a trigger, and you think, oh, this is exciting. This is an opportunity. So when those things come up, it doesn't feel uncomfortable in the way of it's you know, this block is triggering anxiety, it's triggering myself to feel bad about myself, it's triggering myself to think, oh, how long has this been around? I think you then see it as, you know, this block has come up, how can I learn from it? You actually get excited. It's almost like, you know, bring on the blocks, bring on the limiting beliefs, bring on these triggers, because I have the tools now to learn, to overcome, to grow beyond this. So it's where, you know, when you start at the beginning of your spiritual journey, you think, oh my gosh, all of these things in my way that I have to get through, is thinking, oh, all of these things in my way that I can get through, that I can learn. It's about the process, not the outcome. And I think this is something we've been touching on throughout. You know, it's about the process. So if you're able to start linking discomfort with growth, with opportunity, with excitement, actually the process is so enjoyable. It doesn't matter what the outcome is, you know, and if you enjoy it so much, actually the outcome will, you know, if you're doing it in alignment with who you are at soul level, the outcome will be exactly what you desire deep down, what is meant for you.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just, there are some words and phrases that I feel lose their meaning because they are so well worn that people say them, but they don't really embody them. So they just become, and when you were talking just now, I heard the joy is in the journey. But actually people say the joy is in the journey, but they don't really they don't really understand what that means, because they'll say the joy is in the journey, but still be focusing on the outcome and still be focusing on, but I still want to get there. I still want to get that thing. So it still matters. Like you were saying, it doesn't matter what the outcome is. But for a lot of people, they are focused on what the outcome is. And I'm only spiritual if I'm able to get the outcome that I wanted from my ego 3D sort of perspective. If I don't get that job, then I failed, because I believe I'm manifesting that job. So they're not doing the work in terms of aligning with who they're doing it outside in, not inside out.
Mm.
So in terms of bringing practicality, it sounds like it's a change in focus. Don't focus on the outcomes, focus on, is it who you're becoming? Where should the focus be?
So I'd say the focus should first and foremost be on your intention, because that will help the direction you're going in. You know, understanding, okay, what is it I want to do? Why do I want to do it? You know, you mentioned the example of, I want to manifest this new job. If I don't, I failed. You know, if someone's wanting to manifest a job, perhaps that's an increase in responsibility, perhaps that's a step up, that's a new you know, more money. Who is that person that manifests that new job? It's someone who tries, it's someone who, you know, would put in the effort is someone who potentially might fail at things, but they keep on trying, they keep on learning about themselves, they keep on growing. And so if you try once and fail, you know, that's not the person who gets the job.
Yeah. So how can people be more, because sometimes from a coaching perspective, you can ask someone why they want something, but they haven't really considered their why or their intention on that deeper level. All they know is, I want that job, or I want that car, or I want a relationship. If you're working on these things on your own, it's sometimes hard because with a coach, they can see certain things and ask you certain questions that make you actually stop and think, actually, yeah, why does it matter that I get it now? Or why does it matter that that person thinks this of me? Sometimes when you're doing it on your own, you don't have the you don't have that insight into yourself. Like it's in there, but it's so buried that it needs something to cause you to think in a certain way. So when you first start coaching someone, it might be, I want this promotion or whatever it is. And why? Because it's more status and it's more money. Okay, then what would that bring you? Usually people are stuck at the more status, more money. Not the, okay, but what is it about the status? Oh, I don't know. I think it's because, and then they will start thinking about, oh, and then when I was a kid, I was told XYZ. Does the status really matter at the end of, after the third session or something? Actually, no, the status doesn't really matter. It was just, I just wanted to prove something to someone. But actually, no, it's not really about the status. Sometimes you think it's about something that it's not really about. So how do you get to those realizations on your own?
Mm. So, you know, as you mentioned, it's there is that benefit in working with a coach. You know, we can't read the label from within the jar. Equally, we can use spiritual tools to help reflect back to us. So, as an example, you might think, you know, you mentioned the thing about, you know, wanting a relationship. You might look into your astrological natal chart, which very easily anyone can look up their own natal chart online. You know, you might go to, you know, how do I find out about the type of relationship or the type of love that I want to give and receive? You would look up your Venus sign. What planet is in that Venus sign? And then that brings up you know, similarly, you then can Google that, you know, my Venus is in Taurus. What does this mean for me? A multitude of articles online, and then you read that through, it might trigger some things. You might be able to sort of reflect on some things. Journaling is an amazing thing. So doing that research alongside, you know, having a pen and paper, talking to friends about it, whatever that might be. You know, anyone can do these things with access to the internet. You know, access to the internet, having sort of a pen and paper or something on hand. You know, it's about this sort of research reflection. You know, what are the things that's opening up? What's the mirror that's being shown? And, you know, talking about triggers as we were in the last one, if something comes up and you think, that doesn't sound like me, that doesn't feel right, thinking, oh, why is that? What's that triggered in me? What does that mean? You know, and it then creates this space, you know, your mind goes from this is what I want to why do I want this? And it's all these little sort of webs of like, this could mean this could mean that, you know, oh, there's a block there. Where's that block from? And you're sort of branching out and the level of self-awareness you can build by just looking into one thing is amazing. It really does, as we say, it's not about doing one thing, it's about, living as, in alignment to. It will affect every area of your life.
Okay, I'm just going to make a note to come back to a question. But I've had stuck at the back of my mind a guy on TikTok who is actually very good from a spiritual perspective. But he's said something a couple of times now where he's basically said, you don't need this journaling, you don't need meditation, you don't need all of these tools. What they do is put you more in the mind, which takes you away from being present, which is what you need to be to have the awareness of what's coming up for you, what triggers are coming up, etc., etc. Now, I don't entirely agree with that, because I think maybe once you've got to his level, you don't need the tools anymore. But presumably you've got to start somewhere. You can't, or can you just go straight to having awareness and presence?
I think everyone's different. Everyone is different. There are certain things that will be, beneficial. So, for example, talking and being able to reflect with other people, beneficial for everyone. I can very confidently say that will be of benefit to everyone. Equally, there are some tools, some things that might not suit you, but it's up to you. It's going back to that autonomy. What feels right for you? And you can use your inner authority to make those decisions. This inner authority thing keeps on coming up, that decision making tool, understanding how you make decisions from a place in your body. I think this person you mentioned on TikTok, there is this responsibility we have online to not tell people there is just one way and that's it. Equally, anyone watching has that responsibility to think, oh, actually, that doesn't feel quite right for me. I can take some of the information he shares and use that, but other information I can leave.
Yeah.
That this is also what I say with my clients, I'll share the information that's come up in readings, take what is useful for you, leave the rest. It's very much up to you. And I think we also need to be careful about talking about people on different levels. It's not, going back to spirituality, it's not this hierarchical structure. It's not this thing that's only accessible if you look a certain way or are a certain way. It's something that we can all reach. No one is better or worse than the other. And actually, so often when people are first introduced to spirituality for the first time, the questions that they might come up with are some things that people who've been doing it for a while wouldn't think about. There is that joy, there's that opportunity in being the fool in something. This is one of the first cards in the tarot. Being that new person, being the fool, being the beginner, there is so much power within that. So yeah, so the answer to my question would be, it's about individually what makes sense for you, what feels right for you, and giving yourself that autonomy, that responsibility.
So that may actually play into the answer to this question then, because it's not a one size fits all. So I might have to ask this a bit differently. What I was going to ask was, if I'm bringing practicality to spirituality, what am I doing on a daily basis? But I'm just going to change that slightly because it's going to be different for everyone. So can you give me an example of what I might be doing on a daily basis if I'm being practical about my spirituality?
Sure. So first and foremost, I'd say, you build that awareness, you have that time to research, have that time to understand, who am I at soul level? What does it mean to be me? And this is why I suggest using that tool of human design, finding out your inner authority, because something that we will be doing without fail every day is making a decision. So bringing the spiritual information we might find out using this modality of human design to something that's very practical, to making a decision. So that could be You wake up in the morning and you know you would like to do some exercise, and you've got the option of staying, going to a yoga class, doing something at home, or going for a run, using your inner authority to make that decision. So for me, my inner authority is sacral, and I make decisions from a place from my gut. It's a gut feeling, and it's either, for me, it feels like I'm being pulled towards something or pushed away from it. And so I would think about what these three options are, give myself a bit of time, and then what I feel pulled towards, I will do that. It's not always something that is like, no one has the inner authority of like a mental. It must be logic based. It's always something in the body. It's always this feeling. And it's about building trust with that. And I think that's why one of the reasons it's so difficult for us to embody that is because we're taught, in this day and age, that things have to be logic focused. You have to have a clear reason behind everything you do. Having a good feeling about something doesn't cut it for so many people. Whereas actually some of the biggest decisions I've made in my life has been on feelings, and they've totally been the right decisions each time. I've trusted that gut feeling. Didn't necessarily make logical sense, but it's the results, what it's come up with and how it's impacted my life. I would never choose any other way.
Yeah. And there's been times where I've not listened to the gut, and at my cost. Yeah. Okay. So how can astrology help us? Because I think I've already had Natasha on that was talking about the Akashic Records, not necessarily in terms of bringing practicality to it, but she's talked about the Akashic Records. I've talked about, actually, I've talked about tarot or cards with Natalie, and I have talked about astrology with Ahimsa, but we didn't talk about any of these things in a practical sort of sense. So how can any of these be used practically by an individual as opposed to necessarily going to actually, even if you go to someone to help you or get you started, what's the most practical use I can get out of, say, something like astrology?
So with astrology, specifically, first, you'd want to know what your intention is, whether it's something, supporting you in your career, or, create a relationship, or with your health. And then you can look at, if you're doing this by yourself, look into how can I enhance this part of my life using astrology. You'll find out that information online. So it's it's one of those questions that's quite hard to answer, because the response can be so broad and is so dependent on each person. It might be that let's think of an example. Let's say you'd like to ask for a promotion at work, right? You might then look into various areas of your astrological chart. Okay, you might look into Mars, which is the planet of action, about the planet of sort of connected for lots of people about their work, their career. You might look into Mercury, which is the planet of communication. How can I best communicate myself? You might look into your moon, what emotions could be impacting me here. Your rising sign, how do people perceive me? Your sun sign, how you show up. And this information will support you in understanding, it holds up a mirror. What are my tendencies? How can I embrace who I am? How can I use this information to present myself in a way that feels authentic, that feels like me doing it in a way that is aligned? So with it's a very broad question, and I'd say that there are so many different ways. It's just on that individual, what they want, their intention, and then using the tools as such.
Okay. And does that apply for all of the modalities that you use, pretty much?
Sorry, the research.
No, the approach to using astrology and starting with the intention and the well, you know, what am I like in terms of the way I communicate or that kind of thing? Is that the same? Say, if you were using human design, would you be looking at actually similar things about yourself?
Well, with all of the modalities I use, there's always an intention set beforehand, because that helps as our compass. Where do we want to go? And then we look at a modality through the lens of your intention, what you want to create, what you desire to create. And it's the modality that gives us tools that gives us sort of that insight into who we are. It sort of paints the picture. Perhaps the intention is the outline, and the modality brings the color to it.
Okay, so, but all of these things are more guidance based, not. So, say, for instance, I came to you with a very specific, I intend to create a relationship. Say I came to you with something as specific as that. The astrology and the human design only helps me with who I am and what I might be looking, what would be aligned with me, as opposed to do this, this, and this to get a partner.
Yes, I hear what you mean. And I think that goes back to one of the very first points you made. We look at spiritual tools to tell us the outcome of things. That's taking autonomy away. That's taking the responsibility away from ourselves. We're looking for an answer outside of ourselves rather than in. So it always comes back to what feels right to me.
Okay. So if I came to you for an astrological reading, but I was saying to you, the reason I'm coming to you is because I've been single for however many years and I want to meet someone now. How would you approach that session? Because I'm coming in with I want that.
Mm. So get to know that means for them. The why behind it. What is it? What are the blocks been so far? What are the things what that person has tried? What are the things that come up? Because for some of the intentions that come my way for the readings I do, I say, actually, I don't think this reading is going to solve the issue, so to speak. Let's have a discussion about this first and foremost.
Yeah.
The readings that I do, it supports it, but this is the reason I bring all of these modalities and work with them together. Because when you are adding, coaching, mentoring, your astrology, your human design, it's looking at such a range of things and being able to think, okay, what are the things that are going to help us? It brings that practicality to it. It's not, there's one aspect, do with that what you will. It's thinking, okay, how can we use this properly? And that's why it's so important to start with that intention.
Yeah. Okay. It is, and this is why I was struggling to think about what we were, how to break down this topic, because things are so multi-layered and so like, for instance, it might also be that I want that partner, but I've got certain subconscious programs running that are causing blocks. And that's not to do with the intentions, right? All the other things are right. It's just I've got a program running that makes me do certain things that causes me to sabotage myself or whatever. Out of the modalities that you use, how do any of those uncover subconscious programming?
Yeah, absolutely. So human design and astrology can give us insight into blocks that might come up. So as an example, if you have lots of Aries in your chart, you might be prone to sort of quick to anger, being chaotic. So we might look at that as a block, a pattern. if you're using, if we're looking into the Akashic Records and past lives, past life blocks will give an indication of blocks you'll be going through today.
Okay. Mm. So it gives an indication of the blocks. And it's not about, because who you are is who you are. Your chart is your chart. You can't change your chart. So if you are quick to anger, then you're quick to anger. Like, how do you work with that?
So with specifically talking about them, that thing I mentioned with the Aries, that quick to anger, in astrology, you have, with each sign, you have the, let's say, the juvenile side of it, and then the sort of more mature side of it. So a juvenile Aries may stereotypically be quick to anger, hot-headed, chaotic, loud with their opinions. Whereas a mature Aries, that's the one that's known as a leader, a beginner of putting things into motion. So that's why it's never sort of, with astrology specifically, it's never sort of a hard and fast rule. There is a journey within it. With all of these signs, you know, with Virgo, there's that focus on just things just being beautiful. That's the juvenile side. Whereas, you know, the mature side would be very nurturing and motherly, and you know, it's about all of these things have a journey. All of these things we've mentioned already. It's that sort of light side and the shadow side.
And you can dial up or dial down each of those sides, or is there?
So the focus is on stepping more into alignment with the choice you want to make. So, you know, if you want to, as you mentioned, you know, your idea of spirituality is being the best version of yourself, presenting that to the world. You're going to want to choose that more mature side of your sign. So it's taking those little steps, one by one, 1% at a time, more into alignment with who you want to be, how you want to live.
Okay. It feels quite complex. It might not be, but it feels like it is, in terms of having awareness, understanding yourself and who you are and what your triggers might be. Yeah, being aware of your programming even. And there's going to be, there's so many different programs that we have running at any one time. You can't have awareness of all of those programs anyway. So again, yeah, it just feels like it's just a daily, step by step, living as intentionally and aware as possible.
Mm.
And when things come up, how you process them and the perspective you give to them. And it's just living in that way. That's my take on what you've said. I don't know if you've got
Yeah,
another way
it's
of.
totally complex. You know, for each person, there's so much to look into. And that's why it's a journey. If it was easy and you could complete it in one day, what's the point? You know, there is this, you know, we have the ups and downs, the difficult moments, the bad moments, but, you know, the view from the top of one mountain is beautiful because the valley is so low, because you've had to put in the effort, the time, the intention to do it. It's complex, but it's also beautiful that it's complex because there's so much opportunity. There are so many things to learn and do and grow and become. And so that is why there is that focus on the process, on the journey over the outcome.
Okay, good. So, was there anything else that you wanted to say about bringing practicality that we haven't actually covered?
I think lastly, something I'd like to highlight is it's giving yourself autonomy. it's at the end of the day, whatever you read, whatever you research, whoever you're watching on TikTok giving you advice to do X, Y, and Z, is coming back to yourself and thinking, what feels right, what feels aligned to me.
Okay. How do you know it's what's truly aligned to you and it's not your ego?
Good question. So for me, there are various ways to do this. I think the quickest to explain is thinking about whether it feels right if it's either coming from within you or outside of you. So if something comes from within you, it feels like you want to do it. It feels inspiring. It feels like you feel drawn to it. Outside of you, it might feel like, oh, I have to motivate myself. It feels like I should do this. I require something external to me to make me do this.
Okay. So, um, tell us about, because we've already talked about you do astrology, card readings, human design, Akashic Records.
Mm.
Tell us a little bit more about what you do, any programs or anything you've got on at the moment that you might want to talk about.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you. And thank you so much again for this space. It's been lovely sort of having the time to discuss these things. So, as you've mentioned, as Jacqui's mentioned, I am a coach and a mentor using a collection of spiritual modalities. At the moment, what I have on coming up is I'm running Confidence Kit again, which is actually what we spoke about in our very first call. And with that, I do bring spiritual tools within that, and it's such a fun program. I'd say that's the biggest thing coming up in terms of it starting in March. I've run it a few times, and it's one of those things. It's a group program, and we're looking at the definition, your intention, working very closely with each other individually, but as a group as well, to bring out something practically, having those tangible results. And it's one of my very favorite things to work on, because it's, if anyone here is listening, watched our first podcast on confidence. I think confidence is something that is so misunderstood. And actually, when we understand it, we give ourselves that awareness, and it's so much easier to grow than we might think.
Good. So, and when does that start? You say in March?
In March, yes.
So I assume registration hasn't started yet or anything.
So I've got a wait list open at the moment, and final details will be confirmed within the next few weeks. So yeah, by February, we'll have the details up, we'll have the number of sessions up. It's going through a bit of a refresh. I've run it a few times, and there's so much more I can add to it.
Yeah.
It's my signature program, so I'm so excited to relaunch it. New, shiny, glossy. It's going to be a good one.
Good. Hopefully we can, depending on where it is, we can put something in the show notes about that as well.
Yes, I'd love that. Thank you.
Yeah, good. Okay, well, thank you for such an interesting conversation. There's the depth and breadth of this just goes so wide, so deep, so much more than we could have covered off in this this time. And it's yeah, I hope it doesn't sound too simplistic, because it is anything but simplistic, and anything but I also don't like it to sound like it's just about manifesting things, because it's so much more than that. Spirituality is so much more than that. It's not just about manifesting things, although I think that's what brings people to it initially, and then they realize it's about more than that. But thank you for helping me try to unravel some of it to the degree that we have, in terms of being more practical about it. And just the last words I would say, and you might want to chime in on this, is bringing practicality to me means bringing awareness to what you're doing, intention to what you're doing, and working through any triggers that come up. So it's not trying to make the anger go away or the fear going away. It's trying to understand what that fear is that's coming up within you, or that anger. Where is it coming from? is it because of the way you're seeing the situation, and is that way that you're seeing the situation actually true? And maybe with a different perception, could you actually arrive at a different energy that's more aligned? So on a daily basis, I would say it's that sort of thing. And I would say in the early stages of doing this, you probably do, I would suggest that you do spend some time maybe journaling, or maybe going for a walk, anything that allows your mind to come out of the day-to-day busyness, so that you can actually really tune into what your true intentions are, what you're truly feeling. Because in the business of a day, you will feel things. It's just that you're too busy to actually give them the awareness that they need. And I think if you just get into the habit of giving yourself those little spaces throughout the day to bring that awareness in, that will get you going.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's, as you say, just echoing, it's about bringing the choice back into your own hands of how you want to see things, of how you want to react, of how you want to be moving forward.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much for that conversation. Absolutely loved it.
Thank you, Jacqui.
And yeah, there's so much, as I say, so much more we could say, so many different places we could have taken it to. So thank you for helping me keep it sort of on the practicality side of things.
Yeah.
Please don't go away. We will say our goodbyes after I stop recording. Thank you for joining us, everybody.